Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. It's no secret the Call of Duty League finds itself in a rather precarious position, with every single year more teams going bankrupt or paying the minimum salaries, and there's no exception again going into 2024. Some money that is still coming into esports though, because the VC money is drying up, is from sovereign wealth funds such as in Saudi Arabia. We've seen this across many other esports and sports over the last several years. Is the same thing going to happen to the Call of Duty League in time? Is it going to be the Saudi World League? Are we going to have a World Championship in Riyadh? Very much intrigued to your perspective on this in the comment section below. Would this be good? Would this be bad? Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. Just a quick note here. The other day we saw that COD 2025 is rumoured to be basically a follow-on of Treyarch's game for next year, which is going to bring back all the old school Black Ops 2 maps. I do wonder if they are going to, you know, some would say, why not just remaster Black Ops 2, which is probably a good argument to be honest, and I would love to see it. Pick 10, of course, was introduced back then as well, and I think most people prefer this to what we presently have. So I do wonder whether they are going to look at some of the parallels between those games and try and figure out what they could do instead. But let's talk about this whole state of the Call of Duty League, the Call of Duty World League previously, and what's going to happen going forwards. So the CWL was around before the CDL existed. This was what the World Championship looked like back then. This is what, 2019. We had 16 Pro League teams, 16 amateur teams, 32 teams, group stages, 8 groups of 4. 2 of those get through. Double elimination, 16-team knockout bracket, absolutely fantastic stuff. It was always a bit strange in this period though, because usually like 2 weeks before Champs with 32 teams, you would have the 8 best Pro League teams. So quite often you saw it was just Champs really, and then Champs, it was playoffs and then Champs again really, and you got the same results most of the time, but nonetheless it was great to see back then. Now there's been lots of talk over the last few days, especially with what's happening with Evil Genius's Valorant team right now, and they won the World Championship, but yet they're cutting basically the whole team because they can't afford to pay them. This is in some ways an inevitability. I know that you know, Jakob here from 100 Thieves has been discussing this difficulty the teams are currently going through, and saying that there was, you know, obviously massive gold rush in 2020 to 2022 because VCs were pumping money in everywhere, and it was a strategic move to, you know, be in contention for a franchise spot. Certainly that's viable on the Valorant side, but now you get to a point where they can't afford all these salaries. The investment is too much. They can't bring the return from the sponsorship side of the business at all. And now there's going to be a seriously big correction in addition to the current macroeconomic conditions that we find ourselves in. So, you know, as he says, no doubt these teams have been too extravagant in their spending, and this certainly has happened in the CDL as well. And there's also a good argument to say many of the, let's say, the managers of these organizations, the C-suite, are getting massively overpaid compared to what they should be getting paid based on how much the organization is actually returning. So look, esports will have to change over the coming years. What that looks like, we don't really know. And aBeZy, formerly of MLG, formerly of Esports Engine, knows a fair thing about you know, the Saudi Arabian investment group, because his company Esports Engine has been acquired by the I think the Savvy Gaming Group, but basically it's ESL FaceIt. They've now incorporated Esports Engine into that. We don't know the story of what happened behind the scenes, who signed off on it, but aBeZy now finds himself out of the company as a result of all that situation. Now, even he says, I thought this is kind of crazy, pre-EE, he reckons basically that people are massively overspending for putting even on events, and this is where it's going to lean towards the Saudi side we'll get to in a second, but we know it's not exactly cheap to put on events, but he says that every time that he's looked at a production budget for a publisher, such as Activision, almost always he's been able to cut 20 to 40% off that, because as an example he gives, he did an audit of a massive championship event for a publisher and found they were paying $40,000 for the rings, which, you know, sounds an awful lot like a Call of Duty World Championship from back in the day. But after digging around, he found that those rings actually only cost $675, maybe $675 each or whatever. But, you know, it was a massive markup that this company was giving the publisher in Activision or whoever it was, we don't really know. And, you know, they actually only were like $700. But yet Activision, because they're, you know, they just pay whatever they want, they were, you know, paying obscene amounts of markup for this. And aBeZy was like, you don't need to. We could get them at a much more reasonable price. Just going to show some of the the poor management decisions that are made over time. And Esports Engine were seemingly correcting that, but now they're also part of the ESL FaZe group, which is Saudi Arabian owned. So if you guys follow sport at all, you'll have seen this over the last several years. Even, let's say, Formula 1, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix has come around since 2021. I think they even want to have 2 Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia, but they might not be getting 2 Grand Prix. We'll see what happens over time. And even that's the track at Jeddah. And even in 2022, there was massive controversy because there was like a missile strike a few miles from the track, and the drivers wanted to boycott it, but they they didn't in the end. The race went ahead, and thankfully all was okay. And we've seen massively, especially this year, the Saudi Arabian Football League, Cristiano Ronaldo going to Al Nassr, and so many other players following suit. And you can argue that what the Saudis are doing here, paying all the money for these players, is maybe not too dissimilar to what the Premier League has done for the last several years, but nonetheless it's a controversial subject. This is where some of the boys on the flank wade into this discussion, and Ben especially gives his thoughts on this, saying that as it stands, it's difficult to fund a lot of these things, and especially when you consider the fact that many of the tournament organisers and tournament production teams are now owned and operated by the Savvy investment group, the Saudi Arabian group, effectively, out there in, primarily based in Riyadh. A lot of this stuff is for the Gamers 8 tournament, for example. It definitely aligns to a possible future for the Call of Duty League in a similar way. It's happened with pretty much every other esport so far. Not everyone, but the vast majority of esports have had something going on in Saudi Arabia over the last few years. The Call of Duty League has, you could argue, held out until now, whatever you want to say. But I think it's very likely, as Ben says, that, they're struggling for money right now here in esports. And there is, people that are very much willing to invest a lot of money in this space.
The esports scene just needs to it has to gain the trust back of investors if they want to see that sort of investment again, because the way that things have been handled from the bottom from the top down has just been terrible for the scene, in my opinion.
I'm going to tell you guys what we're going to be talking about for the next 12 to 18 months, because Pat is right. Until there's way more path to profitability or close to profitability, team organizations are in a lot of stages and they can raise the VC money. The cheap VC money is not there. You know what money is there? Is the people behind Savvy Gaming Group, the Saudi money. And don't be surprised, we hear more and more investment and consolidation by Savvy Gaming Group, because they're an organization that is spending a lot of money to get a big foothold in the esports.
We might need to get a Call of Duty Saudi Arabian tournament.
But they're not going to buy every org, so it's not. That's kind of irrelevant. Like, even if they came and there was an influx for one org, like that only helps one org. Like, to me, I don't see that playing.
Imagine they bought everything. They bought every org.
But the league. Here's the issue, Pat, is like the esports
champs and
Saudi Arabia.
Where was the CS:GO event at, or the Gamers 8 event?
Riyadh.
Yeah, and Rocket League was just out there too. They're just throwing cash. Go ahead, Ben.
But here's the issue, Pat, is we've seen consolidation on the esports production side, right? Like Gfinity gone, Esports Engine now part of ESL. Like Savvy has obviously made a clear play to try and consolidate the esports production side, as probably leverage to get their events to Saudi Arabia because they own all of the production end, especially North America and Europe on the English speaking side. So I just think you're going to see more publishers starting to do more events in Saudi Arabia because the money's there, the prize pool's there. There's obviously political considerations, but the people that are spending money right now on the scene are, your sovereign wealth entities right now.
Well, so just to show you some examples here, this Gamers 8 tournament they've put on here in Riyadh, this is pretty much what they want this to be as the World Championship for esports, where every single esport has their World Championship out in Riyadh at the Gamers 8 tournament. I think that's been their intention, and it already happens. They're part of the way there, and especially with VC money drying up and, the Saudis continually willing to invest, this is likely going to happen more and more. So, with Fortnite, they had this $2 million prize pool event out there. The $2 million Rocket League major just happened in Riyadh as well, just a couple of weeks back at the end of August, of course. That was a big talking point at the time. Also, Crimsix, right? He was out there not long ago for, I think he plays, it's Rensport, I think it's called, the like gaming, basically sim racing thing that he plays for FaZe. They were out there, and, this is only really scratching the surface, right? CSGO has been moving big time out there as well, especially because ESL, they operate a large part of the CSGO side. They're now operating out there as well. So it's pretty much happening everywhere, and some of the prize pools are you know, legitimately, like, kind of insane, to be honest. I mean, look at this stuff. As this is the Riyadh Masters here for, I'm guessing, like Dota or something. And there was a $15 million prize pool, right? So, look, whatever you think on the morals and the ethics of this, it doesn't change, in part, the reality of the situation that the Saudi Arabians are, you know, trying to get involved in esports, increasingly so. They do have an organization, Team Falcons. This is the team that, a couple of the notable Saudi Arabian players that have 1v1 challenged Illy and stuff. They'll play on Illy's host, then they'll play on their host, and they'll see who gets the most kills, basically, across a couple of Nuketown 1v1s, or whatever the case might be. So Team Falcons are the team. They have a COD team. I believe they might have sent them to a couple of challenge events this year, so that'd be interesting to see if that continues to be the case going forwards. And it is known that there has been interest to execute this in the past. Censor has revealed it, especially back in 2022, that there was meant to be a massive all-expenses-paid tournament in Saudi Arabia with a big prize pool, just as big as Challenger Champs. Activision just needs to approve it. And Doug was keen, right? Because, look, a lot of money out there. This would have been the Gamers 8 tournament, and it was initially proposed, I think, to do it for COD in 2022, and I imagine that they propose it again in 2023. Both times Activision has said, no, we're not willing to go ahead with that. We're not willing to license out our game to be played at this event. And, you know, really, you want the World Championship to be run. I mean, it's basically an American game, right? COD. You want the World Championship to be out in America. Like, that's how it usually should be, and that's how a lot of organizations will like to keep it that way, but doesn't mean that there won't be some events out in Saudi Arabia for many of these esports as it stands. But Activision so far has stood firm, right? They're saying, no, we're not going to, you know, engage with these groups and with these people. But, you know, they now find themselves in a position where a lot of their production teams are owned by the same group of people, and even, if anything, based out there in Riyadh at times. So now Microsoft are coming in. Do they have a different perspective on this? Especially when Microsoft might look at the P&L and they might say, well, you know, this esports thing's losing a lot of money. How do we prop this up? How do we make this work? And at some of the organizations as well. Now, I'm not saying that every single team in the league is going to get bought out by the Saudis. That seems very unlikely and very implausible. But it's not entirely out of the question. And to be honest, Team Falcons have been, let's say, Los Angeles Grillers, rumors that they're going to get sold. There was a big rumor a while ago that the Saudi Arabian, you know, group is interested in buying Los Angeles Grillers, you know, whether they rebrand them to Falcons or whatever the case is. That's part of the plan. But that hasn't happened yet. Maybe it's not going to happen from now for, you know, the rest of the CDL history, but it's definitely something to, at the very least, think about. And there have been rumors going around that from, you know, we're talking 5 years ago at this point, that Saudi groups have been interested in getting into Call of Duty in some respects, and they haven't made many inroads, although they have in plenty of other esports. So, you know, as some people would say, as Ben says, maybe it's only a matter of time. And whether you think that's good or bad, you know, it might be the only reasonable way to keep this esports sustainable. So very much interested your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.